All industries need to be aware as to what is happening with women.
Best thing you can do is talk to them and ask them, how much do you know about menopause? Are you comfortable talking about it?
Hello and welcome to The Conversation from the BBC World Service. I'm Datshiane Navanayagam and this is the programme where we speak to two extraordinary women from around the world about a shared passion or expertise. Now, today we're discussing menopause and perimenopause in the workplace. Today I'm speaking to two women about this important topic. Grace Molloy is a registered nurse and CEO of Menopause-friendly Australia. And in the studio with me is Madhu Kapoor, who resigned from her job in the British government department where she'd worked for over 2 decades when she went through perimenopause. She went on to found M for Menopause. Grace, Madhu, welcome to The Conversation.
Thank you.
Hi, Dashi.
Grace, let's start with you. When did you first hear about menopause?
So for me, it was quite a shock to hear about menopause in my 30s because, as you just said, I'm a registered nurse. So I did a nursing degree in midlife, and my father was an obstetrician and my mum was a midwife. So when I first learned about perimenopause, it was in my late 30s when I was exploring how to stay healthy after having children, and what would be the best way to set myself up for a healthier midlife. And started to talk to some of my friends about this, and we just discovered something called perimenopause. So it came as quite of a shock to me because it felt as though something that was very basic that I should have known had been sort of kept from me, or I was surprised that I hadn't found out about it either in my clinical training or at home where women's health was discussed around the dinner table.
Madhu, what about you? Had you ever heard of menopause or perimenopause?
The only time I heard about menopause was basically when I was being at work. It was seeing women heading to their fan, putting the fan on, or heading out to a window and putting their head out the window because of having a hot flush. That was the only time I sort of heard about menopause, and actually that's all I thought menopause would be. So I was completely ignorant, I think naive, had no idea.
So I think maybe we should define it. Grace, tell us exactly what is menopause?
Well, menopause is technically when we haven't had a period for 12 months, but perimenopause, which we were just talking about, is the time that's leading up to that. And some people say menopause is sort of like adolescence in reverse. If we remember that our hormones started to increase in adolescence, then we start having periods. At a certain time in our midlife, those hormones will start to change again, and then we will stop having periods. So menopause technically, whilst it's just a 1 day of 12 months since you've not had your period, for many people, the menopause transition, including perimenopause, leading up to that time when our hormones are changing, we still might be having periods, but our hormones are going a little bit wonky and out of balance. That perimenopause time can last up to 10 years for many women. And then after that 1 day event, when we haven't had our periods for 12 months, just because we mark that day on our calendar, some people have a menopause party because they're celebrating the fact that they no longer have to put up with having periods. Our hormones don't just suddenly all go back into balance. And so that transition through post-menopause can also reveal some symptoms as well. So it can, for many women, last 15 to 20 years of their lives. Yeah, it's a long time.
Madhu, you were working in a job you loved. As I said, you were there for over 2 decades, 23 years, when you started going through the symptoms of perimenopause.
Yeah.
Talk us through what happened. Were you aware you were going through perimenopause?
I had no idea at all. I actually thought, early 40s would be great for me. My 40s was going to be a great decade for me. I was in a job, daughters were growing up, moving away. In my early 40s, I started to have a few changes happening, such as my skin changing. It would start literally burning out of nowhere, or I'd have blotches on my skin. And then I would have itchy skin as well, where it sort of feels like ants are crawling all over your body, your legs, your arms, my neck. And I just didn't know what was happening. My nails were changing. So those were really small small symptoms, but it impacted me a lot. And it's just something that I noticed, and ended up going to the GP. Nothing was discussed that this could be a symptom of menopause. So they did tests just to see if I was lacking in anything, and nothing happened. So basically I just left my GP surgery, had no answers, and just went back, carried on working. And then it was over time my symptoms started to change. My periods were regular. And I think the one thing that I did understand about menopause was the fact that your periods will stop. And then the irregularness will actually start. Then eventually it was me just having the night sweats. Insomnia was severe. It was every single night. It was very exhausting.
Did you suspect at this point you had perimenopause?
I asked the GP the question. There was no answer at all. She said no, and then they did a test. Because I was under 45, they did a blood test for me, and it was during the first 3 days of your period you had to have this test done. And it all just came back as though nothing was happening. So they never, all of the symptoms that I was having, mentally, emotionally, nothing was discussed about that these symptoms could be because of the menopause.
And how did you feel mentally and emotionally during this time?
I felt as though I was going crazy. I felt as though I was becoming a hypochondriac because something didn't feel right, but I didn't know. I didn't know what it was. Emotionally, I began to doubt myself. Out at work, I was this independent worker, which was respected in the work that I actually did, and I could multitask. Didn't need to worry about anything. Jobs were second nature to me, but I changed to becoming a dependent individual, wanting reassurance that the job that I was doing was right. So, and then at home, it was like the environment had changed. I was always angry, moody, irritable. Then the next minute I might be happy. And the family weren't aware of what was happening. And because I wasn't aware myself, but I needed help.
I mean, some of the symptoms, insomnia, feeling upset, feeling anxious, losing confidence. I mean, a lot of women have stressful lives. They might have very stressful lives at home. They might have very stressful work. How can you even begin to distinguish what's cause and what's effect?
Very challenging. And I think education is the first step. So really letting everyone know what are those symptoms of menopause that are not hot flushes. Most of the time, that's the only symptom of menopause that anyone's ever heard of. So talking about the fact that you can experience heightened sense of anxiety, stress, itchy, crawling skin. You can get tinnitus, you can get vertigo. You can start to feel more tearful, particularly in the workplace. What we see in terms of loss of confidence is that menopause itself doesn't force women to lose confidence, but all of those symptoms in a cycle lead women to questioning whether they're still able to perform in the ways that they used to, whether they're still able to show up in the workplace in the way they used to. And for many people, if you ask their colleagues how they view someone in this space, if they might be feeling that they're not doing as well, most people actually say no. I think they're still doing a great job. So a lot of it's internalized, and we need to normalize this conversation so that if anyone else is experiencing this loss of confidence because of a lack of sleep or some anxiety that they're experiencing, that they don't just put up with it and they open up the conversation at work, explore ways that they can help themselves and go and see a doctor to talk about what support might be available. But also in the workplace, that we just normalise this so that it's not a strange conversation for somebody to have, to be able to say, I'm in menopause, this is what I'm going through, and to feel understood.
Well, let's talk about that, because that is a very hard conversation to have with your colleagues and particularly with senior managers, your bosses. Madhu, did you ever talk to anyone about what it was like going through perimenopause?
No. The last 2 years for me, we had a change of management. We had about 4 changes of managers within the space, 4 or 5 changes within the space of 2 years. So I actually thought the symptoms that I was having was like the weekly migraines were becoming consistent, and the impact of that impacted my work, my performance. The other thing is, one of the managers that I had was the same age as my daughter. How am I going to tell my manager, because he was young,
And was it a man?
Yeah.
How did that also change things for you?
I think because I didn't know what I was going through, I didn't know what was happening, that was very difficult for me to even have a conversation or to pinpoint. I could have a conversation, I'm not sleeping at nights, I might need support, but it took me after 4 managers with the 5th one to build the courage to actually speak about it. But my mind just went blank. But it was, one thing I wanted to say was, there's a lot of women that I speak to, and for me personally, being in my 40s, when I did find out I was going through the perimenopause, was the time that I actually resigned. And that was when I was 50. And it was that month that I got told that I was perimenopause. But I had resigned by then, but it didn't mean anything. I just couldn't cope with my health. And it was 2016 when I actually resigned. Is that as a woman, it's difficult to think that you're going through the menopause, because when I looked at images on Google, I would actually see images which would be of Caucasian women, grey hair. I didn't fit the picture. So for me, I was thinking, no, I can't be going through that. So I found it very difficult. I thought my strength was to carry on in silence. And actually this is why I do what I do, is because suffering in silence is not the answer.
Grace, how does your experience compare? Because you were carrying out clinical research into menopause when you were going through perimenopause yourself. Did you put 2 and 2 together and realise, and did you talk to your workplace about it?
Yeah, so I was working in a phase 1 clinical research unit and mostly around cancer, so not specifically around menopause, but because we were researching cancer and many different patients were coming in who were younger, who were also going through menopause, which is as an induced way to go through menopause through cancer treatment. So again, some people go through menopause a lot earlier because of cancer treatment or hysterectomies and surgeries. So for me, still again, in that clinical environment, I'd never heard an oncologist or one of those people who were going through that cancer treatment talk about menopause symptoms and perimenopause. So it really, for me, it was in that fascination around how can I help myself to stay well through this post having children phase of my life. I did IVF to have my children, so my hormones were already, I knew, not in a balanced state. I knew that that was something that was natural for me. But what I really found the most challenging in the workplace is the changes in emotions and my desire for motivation to change things that I would normally be really motivated to change, but I just felt that I didn't have the energy or the motivation to do things that I used to feel a lot quite passionate about. And for me, I found that the most challenging, being a really driven, performance-driven A-type personality, to find that shift in myself. And so I did end up leaving my job and I took some time off. And for me, the symptoms were quite vague, like for many women, but then I started getting heart palpitations, which for me was almost a blessing in disguise, because heart palpitations are something that you can measure medically. You can go and get a Holter monitor put on and a cardiologist can tell you, oh yes, you're having heart palpitations. And there was no other cause for these heart palpitations. Yet 1 in 10 women in menopause will experience them due to hormone changes. So that was almost my validation that you're not, as I think Madhu said before, going crazy. You're not making this all up. You're not imagining it. It's not just that you've got a stressful job, and it's not just that you've got kids. You've got all that. But there's something going on underlying here that is making it worse.
Had you spoken to anyone at work prior to that diagnosis?
No, I didn't know that I was in perimenopause. So I honestly put it down to stress and my partner particularly was saying to me, I think it's work, because I had started a new role and I'd started a more senior role in a different area of the business. And I think many women do this, sadly, is we feel overwhelmed. We don't put our finger on it, but we think maybe it's work. Maybe it's if I left work and was able to de-stress my life or change careers into something that's more flexible or different, that I would feel better. And for many women, it actually makes it worse, because now we don't have work that, keeps us motivated and wanting to, get out of bed and do things. So I think many women do prematurely leave the workplace, and the data and statistics are showing that many women are choosing to leave work. And sadly, there's some amazing treatment options and ways that we can feel better through menopause. So we just really want to see that women have that informed choice around those treatment options, so that if they're going through this, that they don't have to make those choices to leave work early. But most of the employers that we work with, they want to actually put in place an initiative that breaks down some of the stigma, that provides education, not only to those experiencing menopause, but to those managers who are going to be asked to have more conversations about menopause. And I think that that's where we can see the real change coming, is in empowering managers. And I know Madhu said you had a young male manager, is giving those people the education, because a lot of what is often the barrier to that conversation is that male manager feeling insecure in a conversation and not wanting to say the wrong thing. So they often don't say anything at all.
What should a manager say? What is the right thing to say, if there is a right way?
So first of all, I think that they should have been trained on menopause straight up. That's, what we want to see every employer doing, is not just leaving that to chance, that manager might have some knowledge on menopause and be able to have a good conversation. But so what we train in the workplace is a 4-step conversation that makes it really easy for that manager. Really what they should be doing is asking, how are you impacted by menopause? What are your symptoms? How's it affecting you at work? And then how can we help? What are the things that would be most helpful for you in the workplace? And I often flip the conversation and say, if you had all of a sudden, if it was a thing to talk about prostates in the workplace, men need support around their prostate, you need to have a conversation. How would I feel about that? And I would feel pretty insecure and uncomfortable in that conversation, to be honest. So let's set people up for success. And we can do that using a methodology that we know works, but leaving flexibility for each workplace to adapt based on what their unique needs are around their workplace.
What would you say is the one simple thing that employers could do to help women going through peri and menopause?
It's just changing their work culture. They could put a simple process in place, just talking about women's health, talking about perimenopause or menopause. If an employee of theirs has an appointment to go with a GP, it's just making sure, sort of asking the question, is everything okay? And maybe that might slowly start changing the culture at work to get people to start having these conversations.
I think we need to hold them to account as well. Workplaces can have all the best intentions in the world, but if they don't have a systemic way to do that, if they're not thinking about the process, the engagement, the communications, how they're going to get people's input into their menopause support program, how they're going to think about people from across all the different parts of the organisation and their role type. So I think the number one thing I would say to workplaces is it's got to be co-designed by your people. And the best thing you can do is talk to them and ask them, how much do you know about menopause? Are you comfortable talking about it? If you're not, let's all talk about what we could do. So creating that working group of people across different role types, senior leaders, people who know nothing, people who are never going to experience menopause themselves, bringing them into a working group and saying, look, we really want to do this. This is really important to us, and listening to what they say, and then using some of the methodology that we know works, which is not leaving it up to chance, having a policy written down, having toolkits for people, thinking about people being able to access information discreetly if they don't want to go and talk to their manager, setting up menopause champions. I think we can't leave it up to chance. We've got to make it an intentional program and an intentional change that we see in workplaces.
Thank you so much to both of you for having such a frank and candid conversation with me.
Thank you. I think it's just really important. It's what we need to do. We all need to talk about it. UK is the fact that we are talking about it. UK is looked at from all around the world. Countries are watching what we're doing in the UK. Even though it is happening, the people that are doing things about menopause, when you speak to women, they still don't get it.
No.
And we just need to keep on talking about it. So this is in the UK. But yeah, no, I love doing what I'm doing. So thank you for actually inviting me.
And thank you, Grace, as well.
My pleasure. And thank you so much for having this conversation on your show.
I was talking to Madhu Kapoor and Grace Molloy about menopause in the workplace.